Thank you, Madam Chairman. Hello, Madam Secretary. Thank you for being with us today. I'm enjoying the conversation, and I do have a few questions for you. Although I want to preface my questions by saying that, along with everyone else on this committee, I want to see the greatest access to voting possible. But we have a perennial discussion, and it almost seems like deja vu that we come back to the same place every time, which is, as we're expanding access to elections, my concern is always integrity. And I'm a little shocked by the conversation this morning about how we are so pleased with ourselves about how smooth and well run our elections are, because I don't think that's an accurate statement. I think that of all the states in the country, Connecticut is one where the citizens of our state have questions about the integrity of our elections. Not a single major election has happened in the last decade that hasn't come up with news articles the following day with major problems. You say in your testimony, Election day registration works well and runs smoothly in the vast majority of towns. I don't think that's something to celebrate. It needs to run well in all towns. And we had major problems in the last 2018 cycle. I mean, significant problems that make people wonder about the validity of our elections. So we do have to address these things. And each year I put policy before this committee for maintaining the integrity of elections. And I go along with the vast majority of things we do to expand elections at the same time. It's just upsetting to me to see that we're celebrating when we have no reason to celebrate. We do need to fix things. Regarding the bill that you've got before us, we're talking about Election Day registration. I appreciate that you're trying to come up with solutions to prevent the problems that we have, and I want to work with you as much as possible on those. But there's things in the bill that are not very clear to me. For instance, we're going to require the registrars to have access to the central voting system, but in Section 2, you're allowing them an opportunity to set up another location, which I think is okay, except that how are they going to access that central voting system? Or is that going to be done through the internet or through a router, or what's the mechanism that allows them to do that?
I believe it's a router, and I'd have to find one of my IT staff to tell you exactly how it's done, but I'm told it is not difficult. It would not be internet based, as I understand it. I don't know if I have anybody from, right?
It's a router, right?
Yeah, it's a router. So our system is on what they call a closed loop system. It's not exactly on the internet. You have to have access, and every town has one server or router in one point, usually in town hall. And that's the one that we are busy making sure is secure right now.
Gotcha. So it would be like a Wi-Fi connection, but
I guess so, yeah.
But not on the internet itself.
Right, exactly. We're very conscious about security concerns this year in particular.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
I noticed also in Section 2 that you are going to remove the cross-check process. And I think you alluded in your testimony to saying that it would speed up the process in somehow. And I'm not sure exactly how it speeds up the process. My understanding is that we just simply segregate those ballots. It doesn't hold up anyone in line or anything like that.
If that's a question?
Well, I'm just curious. I mean, that's okay. You're asking to remove the cross-check in our law, and I think it's a valuable provision, and I'm just curious to know what the reason would be.
Yeah, I think the sense is that because the registrar or whoever is registering people has to stop and try to reach another town if someone says they were previously registered in another town, that it would hold things up. Now, I've been talking to registrars who say that they don't handle it that way. So it may be a function of how it's handled at the local level.
Right.
So
I've talked to a number of registrars, and they tell me that it doesn't slow anything down at all because they just segregate those
I've heard that too,
people.
yeah. So we'll have to keep talking about that.
To me, I mean, can we work on this? Because the cross-check to me, look, I own rental property in a number of towns. I have utility bills from a number of towns. I could register to vote. I could be automatically registered to vote under this law in a number of places. And I know it's a felony, but suppose someone actually had the ability to register in 5 towns, vote in maybe 5 different congressional districts, and vote for 5 different state senators and 5 different state representatives and so forth. Yeah, they could be prosecuted, but those votes would still count. Isn't it a concern that we have a mechanism in place to weed that out?
You're saying that they could register using Election Day registration in 5 different places, because, of course, that could happen now. I mean, if you were to register in a bunch of different places under different addresses. I mean, wouldn't have to be EDR. You're saying,
right.
though, under EDR, somebody could come to 5 different places and register in 5 different towns and vote in 5 different towns. Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm not really talking about EDR in that particular instance because I don't know. Well, I mean, if you think about these things deeply enough, they apply in every case because people that are in the Election Day registration line are not voters at all until they become electors. And they're not subject to the cross-check, presumably, because they're not already registered to vote.
Right.
Unless they did register in another town.
Right.
Anyway, it just these conversations tend to breed more and more questions about what could happen if there were bad actors. And that's my concern. I guess, though, the one thing that I have the greatest concern about in the entire proposal is the allowing people to vote after 8 p.m. I understand the intent of allowing people who are in line before 8 p.m. The opportunity to vote, and I can certainly appreciate that. I feel like they should have that chance.
Right.
The problem is that it's not so simple. The election is over at 8 p.m., and there are many, many requirements that are put on the process from that point. The registrars, closing. There's the situation that Representative France brought up where someone is turned away from Election Day registration because they're already registered, but then they can't make it back to vote because we have 2 different deadlines now. You got the people in line who get an extra benefit that the people who are registered to vote do not. And there's requirements for the registrars to collect the data and get it to you. I don't know what time they finished in New Haven in 2018. I don't even know when that was. I mean, when are polls supposed to close so that we can start having results if people are in line at 8 o'clock, but it takes till midnight before everybody's got a chance to vote? What do we do in a case like that? Shouldn't there be a hard and fast deadline?
Well, that's true now. I mean, for all voters. The rule has been for a very long time that if you're in line by 8 o'clock, you're allowed to vote. This is no different. And I guess you could argue, well, I mean, the problem there is probably planning on the part of the town, but voters should not be disenfranchised just because the town didn't provide the resources to get them through the line in time. So the basic rule is if you're a voter and you have a right to vote, if you're in line by 8 o'clock, you ought to be allowed to vote.
Right. I couldn't agree more.
So,
so my focus would not be on expanding opportunities to vote after 8 p.m.
Right.
What I would be trying to do is come up with the infrastructure and everything necessary to make sure that every voter is accommodated. I'd say, if there's one thing that I think discourages people from voting, including in New Haven, it's lines.
Right.
I mean, if they could
Absolutely.
show up at 7 o'clock and vote, or show up at 7 o'clock and see that they're going to end up being there for a couple hours, they might pass. To me, that's a larger problem than accommodating what happens after 8 o'clock. Let's fix the real problem, which is being able to accommodate voters before 8 o'clock.
I agree. And several of these proposals do exactly that. This is our attempt to come up with solutions to exactly that problem.
Understood.
And I think it'll make, actually, several of these things will make it less likely that there will be long lines on Election Day registration or any other line. And, of course, the real solution to all of this, as 39 states are already doing, is early voting, because you take the pressure off Election Day. But that's another conversation.
There's just a couple of other concerns regarding that, just because our existing statutes have other requirements. Like, for instance, I think that the tabulator results have got to be recorded and presented to the Secretary of State by midnight.
Yes.
And I think that could be problematic if we have another situation like we had in New Haven or Stores. And it's not addressed in your bill. That's all.
Right.
Just talking about automatic voter registration for a minute. I'm certainly not opposed to finding ways to get people registered to vote in a way that's more convenient for them. But I do have a concern about cluttering up the voting rolls. You even mentioned this when you were talking with either of my colleagues. The problem is, I think that if we're going to start a process of automatically registering people to vote because they come in contact with various state agencies, isn't there the potential that people can become registered numerous times? And we also know, even though it's a terrible thing, that many people don't vote at all, ever. In fact, there's people in my family, I need your vote, I'm not voting. It's a waste of time. It's frustrating, but those people are going to end up on the voter rolls, even though they have no intention or desire to ever vote. And I could just see a situation where, somebody never votes at all, but they go to motor vehicles, they get signed up on Motor Voter, and then they go home, maybe they get married, they move to a different town, then they get registered again, and pretty soon they're on the voting rolls in 5 towns, 5 different ways, and they never voted anyway. Doesn't this present a problem when we're trying to maintain the integrity of the vote, to know that we have accurate information about legitimate voters?
No, we have processes by which we clear our lists every year. We do the best we can to have the lists be as accurate as possible. People move a lot, and they don't always change the registration, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that they can't vote more than once. So honestly, it is a challenge to keep lists of any kind these days that are absolutely accurate. It's a moving list all the time. But it's okay. People have responsibility for their own list, but they run the risk of not being able to vote when they get to the voting booth. And we, of course, hope that everyone votes. And getting them registered is at least a first step. At least then maybe they'll feel like voters. And then maybe they'll actually end up voting, even if they didn't intend to. Something will come along that'll pique their interest, and we hope they come out and vote.
Well, I share that desire to encourage people to vote and get them involved, but I do not share your opinion that it's no big deal that the voting list is going to have lots and lots of extra names and multiple people registered multiple times in multiple places. I see that as a tremendous problem. I think that if we are concerned about the integrity of elections, we should be trying to refine that list into something that is accurate and meaningful, instead of creating the opportunity for many, many more problems and for fraud. If you're registered in multiple places and people become aware of that, there are bad actors in our world. We need to limit their ability to act badly. I noticed in I think it's section 4, talking about automatic voter registration, there's a section that says that somebody who is applying for a driver's license or a license renewal or an identity card, and the motor vehicle person is not aware of whether they're a citizen, such person shall attest to his or her citizenship. What does that mean?
It means that they sign something saying, I am a citizen of the country, on penalty of perjury and multiple fines and prosecution. Okay.
Are they warned of those penalties and fines at that time?
Yes.
Okay. Is there, forgive me, I've never participated in Motor Voter. My understanding is that if you fill out the registration side on one side of the document and the voter registration on the other side of the document, is it fine print, or is the person who works at motor vehicles asking them to raise their right hand and swear that they're a citizen? What's going on there exactly?
You are not allowed to continue, is my understanding, because I haven't used it myself either, although I'm about to, because I'm going to go get a real ID. My understanding is you cannot continue if you don't answer that question. It's like when you go to get an airline ticket. You won't be able to go any further if you don't fulfill that requirement.
Understood. Okay. It seems like a pretty weak requirement, as far as I'm concerned, to verify whether or not someone is a citizen between you and me.
It's the same way we've always done it. The registration card you fill out is the same process when you do it in person.
I understand that, but the person that does it in the past has been a registrar of voters who had, a system and a process set for just that purpose, not the motor vehicle attendee or somebody who works at DSS, etc., in the future when it starts to happen there. Anyway, those are my questions. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Are there further questions from